Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Win with Innovation, Grow Your Business and Get Ahead of Your Competition, brought to you by Pest Management Professional Magazine and our sponsor of the event, Control Solutions. I'm Danielle Pesta, the digital editor for Pest Management Professional, and I will be your event manager for today's presentation. Before we get started, I want to let you know that today's webinar will be recorded. You are currently in a listen-only mode. A recording of this webinar will be posted to mypmp.net/webinars and will also be emailed to you tomorrow. At this time, I'd like to get you comfortable with our console and the ways you can participate during today's presentation. Please notice the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of your console. If you have a question, type it in the panel's text box and then click Submit to place your question in queue. You may also use the hashtag PMPWebinar on Twitter to submit questions during today's webinar or to enter into discussions with other attendees. We encourage you to ask and enter any questions you may have for our speaker during the presentation. We will address these questions at the end of the presentation during the Q&A portion. Questions submitted during registration have already gone to our speaker, and they may be covered during the presentation. If you experience any technical difficulties during today's event, you may use the same Q&A panel on your screen to submit your issue, and Assistant Producer Grace Ryback or I will personally assist you. You may learn more about today's speaker and moderator by viewing their photo, bio, and contact information in the panel located in the upper left-hand corner of your console. Below the speaker information, there is a Contact Us panel in the bottom left for you to send any follow-up remarks to our team via email. These inquiries will not be addressed during the live event. And if you are logged into your social media accounts, you can always share the webinar's title, description, and URL with your friends or colleagues using the Share This widget that is placed below the slides. Also below the slides is the Refer the Colleague panel, and that can allow you to email today's webinar information to a coworker or other industry professional. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to today's moderator, PMP editor, Heather Gooch.
Well, thank you, Danielle, and welcome everyone to our webinar on how to win with innovation. We have a fantastic speaker lined up for you today. First, again, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Control Solutions, or CSI, for making today's webinar possible. Today, Dr. Janis Reed, a board-certified entomologist and the Technical Services Manager for Control Solutions, will discuss how to grow your business and get ahead of your competition. Dr. Reed has served as a staff entomologist and technical director with a large independently owned pest management company. She also has many years of research and pesticide education experience. She earned her bachelor's, master's, and doctorate in entomology with a focus on urban entomology from Texas A&M University. Her research and interests include social insects, especially ants, as well as the foraging and feeding preferences of insects. Dr. Reed, thank you for sharing your expertise with us today, and we're looking forward to your thoughts on this topic. Without further ado, I now turn it over to you, Dr. Reed.
Well, hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to PMP Magazine for hosting this webinar. I'm looking forward to presenting today's topic, which is Win with Innovation, how to get ahead of your competition. So today's outline, just a little brief overview of what we're going to cover. First is we're going to talk a little bit about David versus Goliath, a story you may be familiar with, and a little bit of a history related to that concept. Then we're going to talk about established businesses versus new ones and how these new startup companies compete with successful, already existing businesses, and give you some examples of that. Then we're going to talk about kind of how to build new business opportunities, shaking up the status quo, and then finally really talking about how to compete in the modern marketplace. So let's start off with David versus Goliath. So most of us are familiar with this story and have heard it before. We know that Goliath was this giant of a man who wore heavy armor and who was basically taken out by a tiny little David who took him out with nothing but a sling and a rock. Now granted, that sling and rock projected this rock at a rate that we would consider close to what a handgun would produce in a projectile today. But still, the underdog versus the big behemoth is a concept we certainly understand. So I want to talk a little bit about history. So there was a political scientist by the name of Ivan Aragon Toft, and he studied wars that had been fought in the past 200 years. We know that Davids win, and they win more often than we think they would. This political scientist looked at all of these wars and really was focusing on the strong versus weak combatants. He found that the Goliaths won in about 71.5% of cases. This is pretty remarkable, but what they found was that these times that Davids won, the 28% of the time, the opponents were greatly outmatched in terms of population, in technology, and other things. So why in these 3 out of 10 times does the underdog come out on top? So what this political scientist wondered is, how did these underdogs cause this change? So he went back and he reanalyzed his data. And in the cases where there was this heavy leaning towards the Goliaths, when they won, what was the difference? And what he found was that when the underdogs changed their strategy and went with something unconventional, they went from a 28-ish% win rate to a 63% win rate. So when the underdogs changed their strategy, played by their own rules, not the Goliath's rules, they win. And this is a quote. He concluded, quote, "Even when everything we think we know about power says they shouldn't." So we have these situations where David versus Goliath, the Goliaths should win, but the Davids are winning. And the reason they're winning is because they're changing their strategy and fighting on their own terms. So now let's look at this from a perspective of our businesses. In the pest management industry, we often have small businesses competing with some sort of 800-pound gorilla in their market. So how do those small businesses compete? My first piece of advice would be, don't fight on the 800-pound gorilla's terms. Fight on your terms. And some examples that I'm going to show you about how to fight on your own terms is to give customers something they don't already have, or use some unorthodox tactics in delivering that service. So again, I'm going to give you some real-world examples of this, things and companies that you've heard of, that got into the marketplace and gave the public or whoever their customers are something that their competition couldn't. And at the end of the day, there's a couple of things I want you to really focus on. Size doesn't matter. Size of the company does not matter. What matters is ideas. Ideas are what matters. So the first of these companies we're going to talk about is FedEx. So FedEx was founded in 1971 as the Federal Express Corporation by a guy named Frederick Smith. He is a Yale Business School graduate. And it's funny because when he came up with the concept of FedEx, he actually wrote a term paper on it. And his Yale professor was fairly unimpressed with his idea. Ultimately, he started the business in 1973, like formal operations. And his idea was, I want to develop a system for urgent deliveries, something that we can get whatever people need moved from point A to point B in an urgent manner. Because before 1973, if you needed to get something fast from point A to point B, you mailed it, and it's going to be 3 to 5 days waiting for what we call today snail mail to get it to you. So by 1983, FedEx had $1 billion in revenue. And if you're old enough to remember the slogan that FedEx had, when it absolutely positively has to be there overnight, FedEx built their brand, built their strategy on delivering packages or other items as an urgent delivery, in some cases as quickly as overnight. Ironically, today, they went up against the U.S. Postal Service almost head to head, and today is one of the top contractors of the U.S. government because of this business model of these urgent deliveries. Later on, they pioneered a system to track packages and provide real-time updates on where your package is, what time it's going to get to where it's going, is it on a truck, is it out for delivery. FedEx is the one who pioneered that technology. Today, their revenue is topping $70 billion, that's with a B, and it all started with an idea about urgent deliveries for people and it didn't exist. So how did they compete? What did they give? They gave the public something they didn't already have that was very unorthodox, something that, hey, let's do this overnight delivery thing, which wasn't easy, so they had to work through a lot of logistics about how to make that happen. So that's the first example. The next example we're going to talk about is Netflix. So Netflix was founded in 1997 by a couple of guys, Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph. And one of the guys really admired this fledgling little company you may have heard of called Amazon, and he wanted to set up something sort of like that. As they were thinking about their business model, they looked around and they knew they didn't want to mess with VHS tapes because they were so fragile. So they found about this new technology that was just coming out in 1997 called a DVD, completely new technology that was introduced to the American public in 1997, and they started their company with 925 titles of movies, which was all that was available at the time. They bought one of everything that was available at the time. The founder said one of the reasons he thought about starting this business was because he had to pay a $40 fine on the movie Apollo 13 at Blockbuster Video. So what does Netflix offer that's unorthodox? They offer DVD rentals by mail, and probably one of the most important things they offered to the general public that was unorthodox and something that was in demand was no late fees, ever. So how did they compete? That was how they competed, something completely different. As we moved forward, they started getting into this subscription payment system. You pay a monthly fee, and you get this flat fee and an unlimited number of rentals in a month. In 2001, they experienced huge growth because DVD players became very affordable to the American public. And so most houses had a DVD player in them. And so more people were like, hey, we've got this piece of equipment, let's get movies in, and we don't have to go anywhere. We just drop them in the mail, get them in our mailbox, and we can watch a movie, and it's this flat fee every month. Then they introduced this thing called streaming. We've never really heard of this. What is this? And this was, again, a subscription service, and you could watch anything on demand through this streaming service. Almost unheard of at the time, and Netflix was the pioneer in this. So again, if you are a Hulu, Amazon Prime Video, Netflix, all of these Disney Plus, all of these streaming services that are now available, Netflix pretty much pioneered most of that. So how did Netflix compete? No late fees, ever. That was very unorthodox at the time. What do they offer that was different? Subscription services, unlimited rentals, all the things that the people wanted, they gave them. So I mentioned this one a minute ago, Amazon.com. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one because, everybody knows Amazon. But it was founded in 1994 as an online marketplace for books. But ultimately, the founder of Amazon decided that he could offer a marketplace and offer people, all of these products in kind of a one-stop shop. Well, then he offered this crazy thing of 2-day shipping. Then he offered subscription services. By 2015, Amazon had passed Walmart as the most valuable retailer by market capitalization. Amazon also partnered with the United States government post office for delivery on Sundays, which FedEx does not offer delivery on Sundays. They do same-day shipping. They do one-day shipping. So these are all things that the people are asking for, and Amazon is delivering. Now, let me move on to something a little closer to home as a pest control example. So you may have heard the story of Bugs Berger. He had a company called Bugs Berger Bug Killers, BBBK. They were headquartered in Miami, Florida, and they had this very unconventional guarantee. It was an unconditional guarantee for no cockroaches, mice, or rats. It was 100% satisfaction in every way from BBBK. So the founder worked backwards from the guarantee into the service. He designed the service for the guarantee. So he knew he wanted this very, very, very unconditional, unorthodox guarantee, and then he worked backwards into the service. So what was that guarantee? The guarantee was a kind of two things. First, you don't owe a penny until everything has been eradicated. All the pests have been eradicated. And then number two, if you're ever dissatisfied or you have a guest who is dissatisfied, you have a guarantee. If you're a company, you get a full refund for up to 12 months of the company's services, plus fees for another exterminator. If a guest spots a pest on your premises, the BBBK would pay for the guest's meal or room or whatever was applicable, send a letter of apology, and pay for a future meal, stay, or whatever was applicable. If the facility was closed down due to the presence of roaches or rodents or whatever, BBK would pay any fines as well as lost profits, plus $5,000. But it was an expensive service. A casual national chain restaurant, think something like Chili's or Red Lobster, would cost between $800 and $1,000 per month for service. And in 1996, BBBK paid out only $120,000 on guarantee work on sales of $33 million. And that's in 1986 dollars, not in 2020 dollars. So we're talking big, big, big money. So what did BBBK do differently? Very unorthodox guarantee. I mean, obviously, that was a huge difference from what other companies were offering. Granted, he charged for it, but it was a very unconditional guarantee that he stood behind. So again, very unorthodox, and that's how he competed. Now, the last example I'm going to give you is actually Control Solutions. Control Solutions started in the 1950s as a pest control company, and in the 1990s became a formulator. And formulators just basically work with active ingredients, producing formulations, and that's what we did for many years. In the late 1990s, we acquired a home farm and ranch brand called Martin's, and in 2004, were purchased by a company called Makdashim Agan. And that company eventually changed its name to Adama. So when you see the A associated with Control Solutions, that's because we're primarily owned by a company called Adama. In 2011, we had acquired a turf and ornamental brand called QualiPro. And then in 2019, we introduced one of the very innovative products that we've seen in the industry in the last few years, the precision delivery system. So one of the things that CSI has that some other formulators and now other manufacturers do not, we have a wide variety of assets, including a new production facility in New York State, as well as aerosol production and capsule suspension production plants in our Houston location. So what did all of these companies really have in common? What did they do? At the end of the day, they're offering customers something that other larger, more established companies could not. And that's what we're going to talk about now. We're going to talk about kind of disrupting the status quo within the industry in which you want to compete. So what does all of these successful businesses, what do these have in common? Like I said, they shook up the status quo. They took an idea of something that existed and they changed it, unorthodox, made it better. They found some sort of niche or opportunity in the marketplace. They filled it and customers responded, and they responded in a big, big way. So when you think about your business, our business, what makes your competition seem so strong? And what about their service is great? And you could also turn this inwards on your own company. What about your company is strong? What about your service is great? Because I could be talking to somebody who runs an 800-pound gorilla business right now. So look at internally. Why are you strong? Why is your service great? Why are you the 800-pound gorilla? And how can you continue to grow on that? But then, what about your competition service is not so great? What aspect of the market are they neglecting? What are they being complacent in? Are their customers really satisfied? And again, even if you have a successful business, it's important to think of these things about not just your competition, but also your own business. What about your business is not so great? What are you neglecting? What have you become complacent about? And what are your customers not completely satisfied about your service? Another thing I recommend is reading negative reviews. And I recommend this both, again, for your competition and also for your own business. Know what your customers are saying. Then, what does the competition expect you to do, and what have you been doing to compete? You're going to have to think about the status quo and break away from the normal behavior. Remember, FedEx came with this crazy idea of offering overnight delivery. Blockbuster has these exorbitant fees. How can you take advantage of these things that their customers or your customers are less than happy about? All right, so let's talk about innovation. Now, when I talk about innovation, people are like, well, innovation's easy, right? Well, not exactly. We'll talk more about this in a minute, but coming up with an idea is not hard. You have to innovate to improve. You have to be able to create breakout products, reduce how long it takes you to get those to the market, be more efficient in your product development or your innovation. One of the things I think we can glean some information from is the entertainment industry. They take blockbuster brands, products, talents, and they leverage them to the rest of their business. So in other words, they look outside their business and hire these superstars. I'll give you an example. The Walt Disney Company makes a movie, The Lion King. They launched this movie to theaters, but that's not the only place you see Lion King. You see it on television, you see cable, you see videos, you see soundtracks, toys, books, theme park tie-ins, Broadway shows. They're leveraging this one product, this Lion King movie, into all of these other places in their marketplace. If you've ever seen Spaceballs, merchandising. Okay, sorry. Anyway, they look to take these superstars in their market and leverage them to make them very impactful in their marketplace. So a company like Disney has a large scope. They hire or create these superstar products which produce really great results, which allow them to make more money, which allow them to increase their scope. Then those companies that have a large scope are able to hire bigger, better, more creative superstars. Those superstars produce superior results. They then make more money. They then increase their scope. And you see how this perpetuates itself over time. Big companies get bigger and bigger and bigger, and small companies fail to compete. So how do we compete? We innovate. Companies with less scope fall behind because their stars produce weaker results. Winners will push industry innovation. Industry innovation then creates powerhouses, which then expand scope and add value. So how do we grow? How do we create? How do we increase our scope? Innovation. Now, I'll give you another example of this increasing in scope. So this is a graph, a chart that shows Major League Baseball teams and their salaries. Anything in gold or yellow, depending on how it's showing up on your screen, is Major League Baseball teams paying 2 players more than the entire payrolls of the 2 lowest clubs in the United States. Now, I want you to take a look at this and see that there are 5 teams in Major League Baseball that play 2 of their players more than the entire roster on the low pay end. 2 players. So what do we probably know about those 2 players? They're superstars. Those superstars are going to produce results. Results make money, more scope, more superstars. And if you look over there on that left-hand side, those top 7 teams, and you counted the number of, let's say, playoff games that those teams have played, you would probably see a huge number of playoff games for teams like the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Cubs, the Astros, and then, of course, the 2020 World Champions, the Dodgers. So again, these are teams that are recognizing superstars creating results, and superstars causing an increase in scope for the entire club. So back to innovation. You have an idea? Great. Now what? It's not how to develop an idea. We want to talk about how to innovate. As I mentioned, developing ideas is not the hard part. Implementing the ideas is the hard part. So how do you take some concept from this drawing board idea concept to an actual reality where you can introduce this into the marketplace? How do you win with innovation? 5 steps to innovate and stand apart from your competition. So the first is to be serious about innovation. It has to be your number 1 focus, your primary focus. The process of innovation has 2 activities. The first is this initiation, where you start with information gathering, you're conceptualizing what you want, planning phases, all of those things. And then you move on to stage 2, which is implementation. Implementation is planning events, your actions, what you're going to do for your decision making, actually putting that innovation into place. So when you start innovating, you have to be able to think of this structure of what I have to do to initiate, information gather, conceptualize, plan, and implement my innovation, putting that innovation in its place. I'll tell you, this is the hardest part. People jump in, they're like, I'm going to do this, and then before they can get to step 2, they've kind of lost their way. They've lost their motivation. They've gotten distracted with annual taxes or personnel problems or whatever their business is dealing with as a fire that particular day. But to be an innovator, you have to be focused on innovation. Number 2, get the right team. Getting the right team is probably more important than any idea, strategy, or any business-related concept you have. People make success, not ideas. The people are going to have flexible minds. They're going to have a shared goal. They're going to have complementary roles to one another. They're going to be great cooperators. It's also important to keep a small and diverse team. You don't want to have 87 people on your innovation team. You want a small, diverse group of people. And that team may change over time, and that's fine. What you want is that team that's going to be cohesive and, again, have that shared goal. Just remember, stay the course. Stay the course. Be serious about it and stay the course. The next step is to, I'm always serious. The next step is to be resourceful. Now, when you build this small, cohesive, cooperative team, you're not going to have the skills, all of the skills that you need to reach your goal, to get to your goal. So what you're going to have to do is utilize the skills of that small team and learn new ones. Now, I'll give you an example in my life. Very little happens in my home where I'm not going onto YouTube and watching someone do what it is I'm about to do. I'll use an example. Recently, I had to change the filter on my refrigerator. So I got on YouTube, put in the model number of my refrigerator, filter change. Came up with a video. I watched somebody walk through the process, and I'm like, I can do that. Walked into my kitchen, changed the filter in my refrigerator. Learn new skills. Learn something you didn't know how to do before. You don't know how to do video production? Learn it. There are people who are willing to teach you. There are online courses to learn how to do it. The resources you need are around you. use them, and they don't always have to cost money. Like I said, YouTube is free to use, and you can get a lot of skills from just YouTube. The next one, and probably the hardest one in my opinion, is to be able to evolve. Your idea, your innovation can evolve as you develop, as you walk through the process. And that's okay, because you're going to find 100 ways to do this the wrong way. And it's just a matter of finding the one right way. You might get something completely wrong. That's fine. Adapt and evolve. Keep going. Stay the course. Stay the course and keep energizing your team. Changing what you're doing as you're walking along will make what you're innovating better. And then last one is to be different. And I go back to all of the examples we used before, whether you're talking about Control Solutions, FedEx, Amazon, Netflix, it doesn't matter. Be different. If 99% of your competition is doing X, you should not do X. You should do something different. So be different, look different, act different. And we'll come back to this in a minute. Then I have a bonus how to win with innovation, a bonus step, and that's have fun. Innovation can be frustrating because you're doing things nobody's ever done before. And if your idea fails, adapt and evolve and have fun. Look at it as a learning experience. Write down what you learned and have fun. Because again, you are going to fail. You are going to run into hiccups. You are going to run into, I'll say, road bumps. It's just a matter of going back, evolving, adapting, and having fun. Consider going back to step one and refocusing. All right, so to kind of finish up today, we're going to go into competing in a crowded marketplace. So all of the things we talked about up to this point apply in this last topic in competing in a crowded marketplace. When you think about Netflix, when it jumped in to doing DVD rental by mail, every small town in America had a VHS rental store, every single small town. Plus, all the major cities had a dozen Blockbusters or more. You know, if you were alive in the 90s, you spent time in a Blockbuster. That's what you did on Friday night, right? You didn't Netflix and chill, you Blockbustered and chilled, right? So you have to learn how to compete in a crowded marketplace. And we're going to go back to a lot of the concepts we've already talked about in how to compete in a crowded marketplace. So first of all, you have to find a niche. So what is your specialty? How are you going to compete in that niche? So Netflix said, you know what, we're going to have no fees. That's going to be our niche. We're going to do this by mail. That's going to be our secondary niche. Amazon said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to offer 2-day shipping, regardless, 2-day shipping. Maybe your niche is being fast to market, like Control Solutions. Our niche is we get in, we make a product, we get it to the marketplace fast. So what is your specialty? Is it sustainable? Like I see a lot of people, about 15 years ago, mold remediation was a big thing. It was big money here in the United States for a while. And there were companies who got into mold remediation. But it turns out that wasn't sustainable and it wasn't stable. So is it sustainable? Is it stable? And is there a large enough customer base to support that niche over time? You want to hang holiday lights. That's great. But it's only going to keep you busy 2 to 3 months out of the year. So is it sustainable year over year? Absolutely. Is it sustainable month to month to month? Maybe not so much. So again, look at your niche, find your niche, and then exploit that niche. The next thing is competing in a crowded marketplace, you have to be different. You have to look different. You have to act different. I see so many PMPs who start their own business, small business owners, and they start that business and do all the same things that they did when they worked for a larger company. They use the same routing software. They use the same service protocols, the same service timing. They use the same products. Everything's the same. that's not competing in your marketplace. That's just working for yourself. If you want to be different, be different. Be relatable. One of the things I keep hearing over and over in my life is old ways rarely open new doors. The way I heard this growing up was, if you always do what you always did, you always get what you always got. But old ways rarely open new doors is much more concise, so I like that one a little more. Do something different. Do something that is not an old way to act, be, and behave different in your marketplace. The next how to compete in this crowded marketplace is to develop your brand. We'll talk about this more, but this brand is going to define your identity. It's going to be what it represents in the marketplace, its value to your customer, and how it's different from your competition. It's important to differentiate your brand, your strategy, and your methods, because again, this is how you're going to determine how you're going to market, how you're going to sell yourself in the marketplace, who you're marketing to. So you want to develop that brand identity, and that starts with having a logo and ends with how you provide every single service that you do on a daily basis, building that brand from day to day. The next of the how to compete in a crowded marketplace is to be agile. So what does that mean? If you can bring innovation to the market quickly, if you can be nimble and change quickly, this allows you to be the first to bring new things to the market and to bring innovative offerings to your customers. Think of it like a speedboat versus a giant aircraft carrier. That speedboat is going to be able to maneuver back and forth and change and corner and move, where that aircraft carrier is going to take days in some cases to really change its course. So if you think about that from a business standpoint, if you're small, agile, and nimble, you're going to be able to change, innovate, and get things to the marketplace very rapidly versus that 800-pound gorilla who's going to take, in some cases, years to change course. So again, make sure you're agile and you can bring new changes to the market rapidly. The last of the how to compete, well, second to the last of the how to compete, is to be customer-centric. Now, what do I mean by that? You have to first know who your customers are. What does this mean? Do you want to target to 70-plus retired people? Do you want to target your marketing to millennials? Who are your target market? And then you need to develop your marketing strategy to the customers that you want, not like a shotgun out into the world. Target your market. Maybe you want to target specific geographic areas. Maybe you want to target only commercial business. Maybe you want to be the guy for apartments. Who knows? But target your marketing to the customers you want. Make your service better for your customers. Now, this one I always ask, do you operate on your customer's convenience or your own? How is your business set up? Can your customers pay online? Can your customers schedule online? Can your customers move an appointment online? How do your customers reach you? If there's an emergency, what happens? Does it go to a voicemail? Do you have an answering service? What are you doing to be customer-centric? Now, I'll use another example here from Control Solutions. A couple of years ago, we were approached and said, hey, we need a dry flowable option for termites. And it wasn't something we were even considering. It wasn't even on our horizon. But because we were approached by a number of customers wanting this solution, we launched Taurus Dry, featuring the precision delivery system. And our customers have responded and said, thank you, we needed this tool. Knowing it's a niche product, it's very specialized, we still came out because it's a customer-centric option. Our customers are looking for this solution. So another thing you can do is customer surveys. Ask your customers, what do you like about my service? What do you not like? What do you wish I had? What do you wish I was still doing? You can do these by phone. You can do these in person. You can offer to buy someone dinner if they'll, participate in this survey. And there are ways you can do that online for free. Again, through SurveyMonkey, it's absolutely free. So what do they want? What are your customers looking for? What do you not provide that they wish you did? So again, be customer-centric. Build your business based on what your customers want and need, not necessarily on what you want or need. All right, and the last of the how to compete in the marketplace is to think big. You know, whether you're large or small, whether you're the 800-pound gorilla or a one-man operator, it's important to think like you have all the resources of a large company. And frankly, you do. You have your local associations, you have your state associations, you have your national associations, you have distribution, you have your professional magazine, you have your manufacturers. You have so many places that you can go for help, assistance, anything that you need. You can reach out to a slew of people and they'll help you. Your customers need to believe that you are big enough to handle any problem, that you're trustworthy, and that you're going to be around in the long term. And all of those things are leading right back into thinking big, thinking like you're a big company with all of the resources in the world. So again, think big, act big, be different, differentiate yourself in the marketplace. The last of the how to compete in the marketplace is empowering your people. So if you are a manager and you have employees, it's important to empower your employees to solve issues on the spot. On the spot. What does this do? It allows your employees to make a happy customer in that moment. There's no, well, let me get with my manager. It's, what do you want? Can I provide that? Yes or no? Now, there needs to be boundaries. Yes, you're allowed to do these things. No, you're not. And there's going to be mistakes. When you give people a lot of latitude, you're going to have mistakes. And it's important to forgive and then train. Here's what you did. Here's what I think you should have done. Let's talk about the situation and let's make some plans for next time. Again, those boundaries. Delegating. Like, take some of that responsibility off of yourself as the business owner or the manager and put it on your service manager, your technician. Delegate responsibilities and provide resources when they're needed. They need help, they need assistance, they need a different product, they need to have a direct line to, again, one of those people we talked about. Provide those resources when they're needed, but empower your people. And the perfect example I use here is Hot Cheetos, Flamin Hot Cheetos. Now I'm going to end with this story because I just think it's a great one. It all started, Flamin Hot Cheetos as a product began with a guy named Richard Montañez. He was actually the janitor at a Frito-Lay plant. But, you know, he was also interested in the business. And the company CEO sent out a message basically encouraging everyone to think like an owner, invest themselves personally in the business's success. So Montañez was inspired, and he one day was working the floor, and the machine that made Cheetos actually spit out a huge batch that were completely unseasoned. They were naked Cheetos. So he took them home, and he decided he was going to do some experimenting. One of the things he knew, that Cheetos didn't have any spicy flavors, and he liked spicy flavors. He knew a lot of people who liked spicy flavors, so he took these plain, naked Cheetos, and he seasoned them with different spices, chili powder, ultimately making them hot and spicy. So then, based on this wet message that the CEO had put out, he said, hey, I'm just going to call the CEO up and tell him about this idea. And he did. The CEO talked to him. The CEO tried the yet to be named Flamin Hot Cheetos, and then set up a meeting for him to present the invention to, you know, the entire product development group. Within 6 months, Flamin Hot Cheetos were being tested, and by 1992, nationally released as a product by Frito-Lay. Today, Montañez is the VP of Multicultural Sales for PepsiCo, which is the parent company for Frito-Lay and Cheetos. And if you look out in the marketplace, Flamin Hot Cheetos has clothes and bags and a mac and cheese brand and blankets and socks and, you know, everything you can imagine. You can get earrings, keychains with Flamin Hot Cheetos on them. I actually read recently that the story of Richard Montañez is set to become a movie because it is literally the story that Hollywood loves. You know, the little guy creating something that literally changed the company that he worked for. So with that, I encourage you to go out and innovate. I encourage you to go out and take it seriously. If you've got a great idea, go out there and make it happen, but stay the course. Be kind of bullheaded about making sure you get your idea through the process of innovation. Be serious about the innovation, get the right team, be resourceful, evolve, be different. With that, I thank you for listening in today, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions in the time we have left.
Well, gee, Dr. Reed, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. That was great. Let's see. I do have a few attendee questions that came through here. The first one I have is kind of talking about leadership teams that already exist at certain companies. In your opinion, how can you best incorporate or involve your leadership team, which I assume may be actually connected to your innovation team that you talked about earlier, but when trying to market your businesses above the competition? Is there an advantage, for example, to maybe set forth the idea of a leadership team in your marketing strategies as a pest control company?
Absolutely. Nobody works best in a vacuum. Everybody I know works better on a team, being part of a whole group towards a goal. You know, if you give a group of people a goal and know that they have the skills, resources, tools that they need to implement that goal, they're going to work together. They're going to find their niches. They're going to find what each person is best at, and they're going to take that idea and turn it into something you never imagined. Again, so many people are like, well, I can do this by myself. And innovation doesn't work that way. Innovation, you have to have other people's thoughts, concepts, ideas, because they're going to look at things from a completely different perspective than you do. And it's important to be able to get that input from that variety of people. I also think it's important to include people on that innovation team from different areas of the business. So maybe operations, maybe boots on the ground, maybe office staff. You know, encourage a diverse team with lots of skills.
Great, that makes total sense, and it kind of follows too to perhaps formalize that group as far as like maybe you have monthly, well, with the pandemic, perhaps monthly Zoom meetings or something, kind of with maybe an agenda or maybe just an open door policy that is something. If creativity strikes, maybe there's maybe an online forum thread in your intranet or something like that. Would you agree that makes more sense to keep the ball in motion?
I'm a firm believer in set meetings. In order for things to go forward, people have to know there's a deadline for the next update. So if you know you've got a meeting in 2 weeks and you haven't done anything since the last meeting, it might encourage you to do the things you said you would do at said last meeting. So I'm a firm believer in set meetings. And some of those meetings are, hey, let's just get an update. Some of those meetings are, hey, let's brainstorm the next stage of our innovative process. Absolutely.
Great. Let's see, we have another question here. Kind of talking about confidence, Dr. Reed. I know that a lot of, especially newer business owners, might be a little bit timid about things. They don't want to have they have too much false ego that kind of bites them in the end. So where's that sweet spot of what we need to do to be confident enough with a business in competition and marketing?
Ooh, that's hard. I'm like you, confidence is a double-edged sword. In some ways, it can be a great thing for you to be able to go out and try things that you never would have tried. But on the flip side of that, it can hurt you because you won't ask for help. You won't go out there and be like, this may be something I don't know as much about as I thought I did. Maybe I should get input from one of my team members. So for me, the way I build confidence, first of all, is being prepared. Going into a situation, knowing everything I can about that situation before I go into it. The next is kind of, get feedback. And this, again, comes down to pitch this idea to somebody who maybe is a mentor to you or someone you can trust and get feedback. And then, like, you know, for me, confidence building comes from taking risks, and not necessarily from taking risks and being successful, but failure can be useful too. And I say that because if you're good at everything, you don't ever have that having to kind of tackle those new challenges. So, you know, being able to taking risks, failing, and succeeding from time to time. Again, for me, reaching out to my mentors is something that has always been useful for me for confidence building. Like, hey, I have this idea. What do you think of this idea? And if they say, wow, that's interesting, and we end up having a 30-minute conversation, it certainly will build my confidence about that being and something to pursue. So again, double-edged sword for sure, but you know, you don't want to be standing in your own way either.
Well, that's the perfect response. Thank you, Dr. Reed. As far as that goes, knowledge is power, and to get that feedback from mentors and your colleagues, and you know, and also taking those calculated risks and learning from mistakes, that all makes sense for sure. I guess that kind of leads into the next question we have here. What is there best practices, I suppose, in how to pitch yourself to potential clients to prove to them that they need your pest control service or an add-on service that maybe you're expanding into?
So I've always said pest control is one of the hardest service-based products to sell, because at the end of the day, we are selling the absence of something. You know, if I'm a plumber, if I'm an electrician, if I'm a painter, if I am a TV repairman, all of those things, there is a tangible difference from before the guy is there and after the guy is gone. Something works, something looks different. You know, it's very tangible. Whereas pest control is kind of the opposite. When we show up, the goal is for nothing to be there. You're paying for nothing. Like, it's a very weird situation that we find ourselves in this industry. So when I'm talking to clients, if I'm trying to pitch something, my first thing is make it short. Nobody wants to listen to you talk for an hour and a half. Keep it short, make it clear, and then explain to them what the problem is they're facing, how your service can solve it. And then once you do those things, if you have that confidence we talked about, you have the ability to, you know, sell yourself as, you know, I can compete with the big guys because I have all these tools, I think you'll be very successful. So keep it short, keep it sweet, make it clear, explain their problem, explain how you can solve it, and maybe even why your service is better than the next guy. But I find that selling yourself is so much more effective than talking about why somebody else is not as good.
Very, very, very insightful there. And I know it probably has gotten even harder in recent years because our industry is full of, you know, we've reached a pinnacle of low odor products like Control Solutions offers. So I think it's, you know, people are like, well, I don't smell that your technician has been there. And that means we're doing our job.
Right.
All right. We have just a couple other questions here. Let's see. Do you think it's a priority for small pest control companies to invest in brand development? As far as, do you think it's worth from the jump, like you get your first employee, you better have matching shirts, that type of thing? I mean, as far as to reinforce that brand development?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yes, because those employees have to be confident. They have to be comfortable. They have to feel like they're working for a professional environment. And if they're confident, if they're comfortable, they feel like they're in a professional environment, they're going to be more likely to behave like they're confident, comfortable, and in a professional environment. You know, building brand awareness up front is so important. I think part of the business strategy should be, how do you want your technicians to look? How are you going to be different from your competition? And for me, that is such an important one, is to building brand development and starting that early on.
Perfect, perfect. I think we have time for one more here. And it's a good one. Perhaps I think just about everybody on the phone has probably, or on this webinar, has probably had this at some point in their careers. But you have a good idea, you have an innovation. How do you get buy-in from perhaps some of the older, more established folks in your organization that, you know, what you're saying about old ways rarely open new doors? Do you have any tricks around that?
Oh, yeah. So I think for me, what works for me, first of all, is you have to you have to put it in terms they understand. So if you have an idea, like let's say you have an idea to change something in their business to be more time efficient, you know, whatever it is, put it in a term that we'll just call it a spade, the old person is having trouble understanding, because that's usually what it is. Old people are less likely to be innovators, right? So you want to put in ideas that they can understand. And what I mean by that is, if we do this, it will save this amount of time, and in 1 month it'll save this many dollars, and in 1 year it'll save this many dollars. Put it phrase it in a way that people will understand. And I shouldn't say that about old people. That was kind of rude. But again, innovation is hard when you have an element of pushback. Or my most favorite one that I've heard is, well, we tried that before and it didn't work. Well, that was also 10, 15 years ago. You know, Microsoft came out with something like an iPod first. It flopped. A few years later, Apple comes out with an iPod, and it turns into like a multi-billion-dollar product. Just because something didn't work 5 years ago doesn't mean it's not going to work today. So I really hate well, we tried that before, or that's just not how we do things. Those things make me irate. So put it in words they understand. Put it in a concept they can understand. So again, formulate that coherent idea. Keep it in draft form, but formulate that idea, and then pitch it in a way that I'm going to say higher ups, leaders can understand. The other thing, this comes down to talking to your mentors. Pitch the idea to your mentors. Have them play devil's advocate. What do they see as something that could potentially be a downfall? And have that as part of your pitch. Now, here is something I could see that could be a potential downflow, but I think if we do A, B, C, it will increase our profitability even more. I'd like to walk you through what I'm thinking. You know, again, so I think that having that pitch and giving it in a way that they would understand it is going to be the difference between a successful pitch and we did that 5 years ago, it doesn't work. Now get out of my office, you know. So again, get feedback from other people and just forge ahead, you know, and see what you can figure out. But I definitely have been there. I totally understand. A lot of people reject ideas because they're scared and they don't know what's going to happen. So showing them what can happen in a good way can help push that idea through.
That is solid advice, Dr. Reed, all the way through. So thanks again for discussing these steps and sharing your wisdom and insight with us. And we're going to wrap up now. First, I would like to thank everyone for attending, well, in addition, of course, to Dr. Reed for presenting. But we appreciate everyone's time today. Now, Danielle has a few closing remarks for us. Danielle?
Thanks, Heather, and thank you, Dr. Reed. And thank you all for attending today's webinar, Win with Innovation, Grow Your Business and Get Ahead of Your Competition, brought to you by Pest Management Professional Magazine and our sponsor, Control Solutions. If you have any questions for Heather or Dr. Reed, you can reach out to them directly. I'll put the contact info up on the screen now, and you can use their email addresses there. A recording of this webinar will be emailed to you tomorrow and posted to mypmp.net/webinars. Upcoming webinars from PMP will also be posted to that page, so stay tuned for some upcoming ones. Thank you all for attending, and we hope you'll join us for another great webinar.